and a vital role for the United Nations means a vital role for the United Nations.
Overall, one would read the resolution as suggesting something less than an equal partnership for the United Nations in the reconstruction. And it may be that that is what Claire Short is saying breaches assurances that were given to her.
On the ground in Baghdad, Washington's new man in Iraq is Paul Bremer in dark suit and desert boots. Bremer's relieving retired General Jay Garner in the blue shirt, who spent 3 weeks failing to impose order, though his successor paid tribute.
General Garner and I are pledged to working very closely together. He's done an outstanding job with his team here. I don't anticipate any problems with any of the changes. We're not here to be a colonial power. We're here to help turn over as quickly as we can efficiently do it to the Iraqi people, their country. Thank you very much.
Every day brings demonstrators onto the streets, complaining about everything from lawlessness to a lack of water. What difference will Bremer make? It's said he can speak to George Bush directly and can issue orders to US generals. His first task, to quell unrest, which is hampering aid agencies.
It's pretty shocking to see just how much of a mess the city is in, and it's worrying to get the views of a lot of people, including diplomats here, a lot of people who know a lot more than I do, who generally are pessimistic. They think things are going to deteriorate this month.
As for Iraq's alleged weapons of mass destruction, the US military is investigating whether this is a mobile biological weapons lab discovered near Mosul. And in custody tonight, Dr. Germ, a microbiologist accused of developing germ warfare. Rehab Taha has a doctorate from a British university. Despite these possible successes, there are reports that operations to find weapons of mass destruction are being wound down, even though very little hard evidence has been uncovered. The Shiite cleric Ayatollah Mohammed Baqir al-Hakim has continued his triumphant return from exile. His presence and the fervent support he commands may make him less welcome to Washington's new man in Baghdad.
There are 15 graves. In each of that there are about 1 to 200. We have till now 3,000 of the cadavers.
3,000 so far. There may be 10,000 here. The leader of the Iraqi National Congress said many may have been Shiites from the south massacred after the failed 1991 uprising.
Where is Amnesty International? Where is Human Rights Watch? Where is the German Chancellor who tried to save Saddam from the war? Where is President Chirac? Where are all these people? We want this to be documented.
We have an idea of, hopefully a pretty good idea of everything that was here, because we do understand that they're removing some of that they know that are relatives and burying them in holy ground. And we just want to document the magnitude of what's here.
It needs to be secured, then there needs to be a proper forensic investigation. So you need to take photographs of the particular way that the bodies are actually lying in the site. You need to be able to examine them.
In the Commons, the Prime Minister was asked when forensic experts would be sent to Iraq.
We are urgently looking at how we redouble our efforts to protect the sites and to make sure that we gather the evidence, because no matter what the exact forum is in which people should be tried for these crimes, it is undoubtedly true we need to protect the forensic evidence that will allow us to try them.
In Basra, mass funerals for the victims found in mass graves south of the city a few days ago. Human rights groups say up to 200,000 disappeared in the last decade of Saddam's rule.
Sophie, we're just rounding the coast of southern Devon, approaching Tor Bay. I have to say that the channel isn't particularly welcoming, but that doesn't matter for the crew on board who are counting down the hours to those reunions. But as I found out today, the end of this sort of deployment also means goodbyes. Within sight of Land's End, a parting of the ways. For 3 months, these Sea King helicopters and their crews have been part of the Ark Royal family. Today, as the carrier faced the grey waters of the Channel, the 3 squadrons that had supported Marines spearheading the Iraq operation lifted off for their home base at Culdrose. The traditional flypast, a farewell and a tribute A moment to remember the 6 aircrew and 2 machines lost during the
of crippling sanctions after all of those bitter rows on the UN Security Council. Finally this morning there was agreement, and for Britain and the United States there was also much needed, very valuable diplomatic and legal cover for their occupation of Iraq.
The lifting of sanctions marks a momentous event for the people of Iraq.
The vote when it came was clear-cut. Even France, Germany and Russia supporting this resolution. Only Syria making a lone protest by staying away from the chamber. For months the Security Council has faced bitter divisions, but this was a classic UN compromise that suggests the deep wounds are being healed.
The draft resolution has been adopted.
The whole United Nations system will hope that the vote which we have just taken marks a return to sustained consensus on one of the most difficult foreign policy issues we have faced.
America did make some key concessions, for example, giving the UN a larger role in Iraq. But Britain and the United States are now the diplomatic as well as the military victors. Effectively, they now have legal control of Iraq's oil industry, allowing them to use the revenue for reconstruction. America also remains in the driving seat when it comes to shaping Iraq's political future. For Iraqis, it is a moment of hope. The toughest economic sanctions ever imposed on a nation are being lifted. It means one of history's earliest trading nations can once again engage in commerce with the outside world.
It will show to the Iraqi people that the international community is there for them, notwithstanding the disagreements that have occurred in the past with respect to this conflict. We are now united to move forward.
President Bush is also welcoming the vote at the UN, but many critics are saying America remains ill-prepared for administering Iraq. Certainly there is no sign of when the military occupation will end and when Iraqis will be able to govern themselves. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Within hours, the new UN representative on Iraqi issues. Meanwhile, there was plenty of violence in Iraq in the last 24 hours. 1 American soldier was killed, 7 others were injured in a firefight in Fallujah, west of Baghdad. Matthew Chance joins us now with the latest from Baghdad. Matthew?
Thank you, Anand. And there has been something of an uprise in fighting across Iraq, fighting against US soldiers, various US units in various parts of the country. There are a number of incidents that we've been reporting, but we'll start in Fallujah, about 70 kilometers or so to the west of the capital, Baghdad, where we're told by US military officials that a hostile force of unknown size attacked an army unit on Tuesday morning, that's this morning local time, killing 1 soldier, US soldier, and injuring 7 others in the firefight that followed, we're told by US forces. The US forces there killed 2 of the attackers at least and captured another 6 of them and are currently holding them in custody. It's also been confirmed that a US Army chopper, which was in the area carrying out a medivac operation as a result of this incident, trying to get the wounded out of the area, was damaged on the ground there, not by hostile fire though, according to US military officials, instead by one of the US's own armoured vehicles, a Bradley fighting vehicle, apparently struck the chopper as it was manoeuvring to get into a firing position. Fallujah, of course, has long been a centre of resistance against the US occupation. There's been a number of incidents involving US troops and supporters of the former regime of Saddam Hussein in the area. Other incidents too, notably just on the outskirts of the city of Baghdad, here from where I'm speaking to you, near the airport, where we're told by US officials in the hours before that earlier attack in Fallujah, there was an attacker who stepped out onto the road and threw what they're calling a satchel bomb underneath a US armoured Humvee Jeep-type vehicle, blowing it up, killing another US soldier inside, injuring several others. Another attack up north in the town of Haditha, or near the town of Haditha, that's about 180 kilometers from Baghdad, where again a US Army convoy came under attack from unknown gunmen using automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. All these, of course, adding up to a great deal of insecurity on the ground for US troops. Captain David Connolly is the US military spokesman here in Baghdad.
Iraq. One was to remove the regime. Another was to search for and destroy weapons of mass destruction. Neither of those 2 tasks are complete. The there are many signs out there on a daily basis that show that things are improving. But we know that through these incidents yesterday that there's still some things to be done.
Still some things to be done indeed, and a great deal of security to be imposed before this place is anything like a safe place for US troops.
It was the war leader's dream photo opportunity. Tony Blair mobbed by grateful liberated children in the playground of a Basra school. One boy, urged on by his teachers, delivered the crowning image. Tony Blair looked visibly moved by the reception here. Inevitably, this trip was painstakingly designed to accentuate the positive. Though lawlessness has kept many other schools closed and many other buildings and utilities are in tatters, Mr. Blair came to a school which British soldiers had helped to get up and running again.
And we from my country and the people here are delighted to have helped you in this regard.
Earlier, Mr. Blair addressed 400 British soldiers gathered at their temporary base in one of Saddam Hussein's old presidential palaces.
This is for me, I should think, is it? Right. I just start away, do I?
Please, sir.
Okay.
Yep, they're at your
Well, it's really good of you to have me here today, and I'd just like to express the sense of pride that everybody has in Britain over the magnificent job you've done.
Mr. Blair said he hoped that in a couple of years Iraq would be a peaceful, functioning democracy that some soldiers might like to revisit. And he claimed that the war in Iraq had transformed attitudes in the world's most unstable and threatening region.
And the other thing I think will be very clear is that when people look back on this time and look back on this conflict, I honestly believe they will see this as one of the defining moments of our century. And you did it. It was your courage and your professionalism that did it. And I just wanted to say to you, because I know people back home, you know, you'll read lots in the media and the newspapers. I just want to say this to you. People back home are incredibly proud of what you've done.
But back home, controversy was still raging about the government's original reasons for going to war.
Pictures are the bit of the job that's easy, so anyone who wants a picture can...
Even as the glad-handing carried on in Basra, there were fresh claims that the government had stretched the truth in the build-up to war, when it claimed that Saddam's regime was capable of mobilizing weapons of mass destruction in 45 minutes flat. The government denied that MI6 had warned it not to publish that claim, but admitted it was based on only one source.
In terms of that particular aspect of it, as best I understand that, and that remains the case. But that of itself, if it was single source, doesn't make it inaccurate any more than corroborated sourcing proves something. What we've got to do is have best judgment on the breadth of the information available to us and the depth of that information, and then make those political judgments.
Well, I feel astonished more than anything else that we should now hear that something as important a piece of intelligence as the one that you've just described should have been the subject of manipulation. If you manipulate intelligence in that way, then you really turn it from intelligence into propaganda. I think it's a source of grave embarrassment for the government, coupled with the fact that as yet no weapons of mass destruction have been discovered in Iraq.
But in Iraq, Mr. Blair was making new, even bolder claims for the war. He said the occupation of Iraq would deter terrorists, assist the Middle East peace process, moderate the behavior of countries like Syria and Iran, and make the region and the world a safer place.
The Ajnadin Quarter in Baghdad, where Saddam Hussein housed some of his most loyal officials. Amir Mohammed was a fighter pilot, just one person from Saddam's vast military machine, suddenly told he's out of work. Once proud of his uniform, he packs it away for good. His neighbour is a young tank officer whose unit was bombed in a US airstrike. He slipped into civilian clothes and melted away. Now, every morning, they get together with other neighbours, all of them from the military.
More than 1 million people now out of work and now facing and suffering from the pressure of the conditions of life. And if someone faced pressure for a long time, there will be a reaction.
A threat perhaps, but showing off his photo album, it seems there's also a mood of denial in the House.
We hate Saddam Hussein.
Why didn't you overthrow him? I was too old, he says, but he retired as one of Saddam's most senior officers. Do you regret not overthrowing Saddam Hussein?
It was impossible to overthrow Saddam, for he was surrounded by many defending circles.
So someone else did it, and they're now in Saddam's palaces, and they don't have much time for complaining Iraqi officers.
We're still in the process of removing the regime. The head of the regime has definitely been removed, but there are still some Baathists and other regime security holdouts.
Every family in this neighborhood relied on Saddam Hussein's structure. Most of them are from the defense and information ministries. The jolt of reality now is that none has a job. Like it or not, he was part of the regime. He fought for and was paid by Saddam Hussein. Now Ali Yassim has time on his hands to wait and see what the new conquering power will do with him. Humphrey Hawksley, BBC News, Baghdad.
Arriving in the country. Now, these are U.S.-led inspectors to replace that UN team that searched for those weapons of mass destruction for more than a decade here in Iraq. Now, General Keith Dayton, who's heading that new team of American intelligence experts, many of them, has arrived in country, and he will be joined eventually by more than 1,000 experts who will begin sifting through the evidence, interrogating people, and trying to do more combined analysis of those findings. Now, General David McKiernan, who's the top general here in Baghdad, had told reporters today that he believes the evidence will show that there had been a credible threat from weapons of mass destruction.
I think that the exploitation, the intelligence related to following up all the leads on weapons of mass destruction is going to take some time. And I probably don't know what I don't know about the extent of weapons of mass destruction. I know that we got the #1 weapon of mass destruction in Iraq. That was Saddam Hussein.
The question is, though, where is Saddam Hussein? And now the U.S. Army has gone back to a site that they bombed on April 7th in the upscale neighborhood of Mansour to take a second look at the rubble of that house. Bombs were dropped on the house, which was thought to be a meeting place of Saddam and a lot of his top officials. Now, General McKiernan, in talking to reporters today, said reports seem to have surfaced from intelligence sources that caused them to go back and take another look. They're digging through through the rubble of that house for human remains, which they will take and do forensic tests on. Now, McKiernan said they did not have the DNA of Saddam Hussein, so it's unclear how they would match that if, in fact, his body was still there. Zain?
Jane, what happened to all those former Iraqi regime officials that either surrendered or were captured? What's going on? We're not hearing much about that.
It's a very good question. They've been taken into various places for detention and interrogation, and the U.S. is keeping them under wraps, really. Some of them are believed to be held at the airport, which is under control of the coalition forces, formerly the Saddam International Airport, but they're being held in other places as well. But certainly all the attention these days is focusing on Saddam and on his sons. And urban legend here in Baghdad, people swear they've seen Saddam Hussein. They also believe that he escaped the ruins of that house that we just saw in the neighborhood of Mansour when he was betrayed by one of his top officials. The story goes that when he realized that official was not coming to that meeting, he told everyone to evacuate immediately. As with everything else here, there's still a lot of questions, and it's unclear even whether going through that rubble and doing the forensic tests will ever conclusively prove whether Saddam Hussein or anyone else was in there. Zain?
Jane Araf?
There are 7 different palaces grouped together here, one for each member of Saddam Hussein's family. All appear to have been absurdly luxurious, at least they were until the Americans sent several cruise missiles their way. 4 of the massive structures were hit on the first night of the war, as the United States tried to assassinate the Iraqi president with the opening salvo. This mural in Saddam's personal villa shows that the Americans were right to believe they had the ruling family firmly in their sights. It's only the timing they may have got wrong. We know for sure that this was the home of one of Saddam's daughters because strewn all over the floor here is stationery bearing the name of her husband Kamal, a man Saddam had executed back in 1996. Saddam is thought to have survived the attack. He may have escaped beforehand, or perhaps he took refuge in the network of bunkers that lie beneath the complex. There are tunnels and stairways leading deep underground. At the end of one passageway, we find an entrance to the hideaway. Heavy door. Well, this is it. There was a large network of rooms, some of them huge, mirroring the dimensions of the ground floor above. A lot of thought went into this. Obviously, this place is now in a fairly shoddy state, but there is still enough evidence, despite the burning and the looting, to suggest that this bunker was intended to be a home, a place where people were supposed to live, and in some style. Under another of the palaces, we find a bunker that was partially flooded. But again, this was a large construction with a warrant.